Tonight I am going to talk about chapter 3 of the book Interconnected by Galwan Karmapa. And this is still part of the first section where he is talking about understanding intellectually how we are interdependent and interconnected with everybody else on the planet, with all other beings, all other forms of life, and with the physical environment, the planet, the environment, and so forth. We tend to think that we are independent and separate and so forth. And this chapter, or this section, he's talking about understanding, at least intellectually, that this is a misconception. Chapter 3 is titled Being an Interdependent Individual. So he starts out by saying that individuality and interdependence are not a contradiction, even though it may seem like that. We, of course, have unique personality traits. We have a unique history and so forth, but these come about through interdependence, that these are things that we develop over time. The contradiction is between our beliefs and reality, the reality of interdependence. The belief, which consists of false assumptions about individuals, whether it be ourselves or other people, is that we are self-sustaining, we are separate, we are independent, that we are discrete individuals. We may even believe that we can do whatever we want with no consequences to anybody except ourselves. And in fact, it's much easier to see the falsity of these beliefs in other people. And we could look at the world today and see a lot of people that are causing a lot of harm in the world because they feel this way. And this is a source of selfishness. But what we are encouraged to do by Galwan Karmapa is to look at ourselves and see these things in ourselves. Because if we can see these in ourselves, then we can start to change. So there's a quote here on page 60. That deeply held and widespread view is the source of our deepest confusion in life and the gravest problems in society. And this is nothing new, that this has a long, long history. The Buddha, who taught 2,500 years ago, he taught about interdependence as being extremely important. And it didn't start at the time of the Buddha. It goes way, way back. So this idea, this false idea of self is constructed by labeling and projecting. Karmapa talks about a fabricated self, a self that is constructed, that is put together by parts, and the parts come from around us. I looked up fabricate in the dictionary, actually online. Who uses a book anymore these days? And fabricate, one definition that works very well in his use of a fabricated self, is to put together from pieces, as in fabricate in a factory. Let's say fabricate a refrigerator. And Another definition of fabricate is to make up, to lie, as in a trial to fabricate evidence. The fabricated self has both of these definitions, that it's false and it's fabricated from pieces. And the pieces, of course, come from around us, from interdependence. A lot of who we think we are comes from what other people tell us, what our parents told us when we were very, very young, what we see on television. We like to think that we're not affected by advertising, but it has a certain subtle permutation, you might say, or it subtly affects the way we look at the world and look at ourselves and look at other people. If it didn't, why would they spend so much time and money on advertising, whether it be on television, on the internet, and so on? The bottom line is that we are the result of countless causes and conditions. Some of them are very subtle that we're not even aware of, and some of them are very obvious. So we need to look into this and realize if we review our lives, we see that we have received help throughout our lives to get to where we are today, whether it be from our parents giving us birth and taking care of us. Even if we're adopted, we still had a birth mother, and then after that, somebody else took care of us. But when we were born, we couldn't take care of ourselves. I went grocery shopping today, and I didn't produce a single bit of the food that I bought at the grocery store, but I'm going to eat it all unless I share some of it. So the food connects me with people all over the world. And then I used a credit card, and there are people that you don't see that do manage credit cards. Every once in a while, you have to talk to them even. You can do a lot of stuff on the internet, but I had to talk to one the other day, an actual living person, because they sent me a notice about a charge of over $9,000 on my credit card. And they asked me, "Did you make this charge?" And I said, "Of course not." There was interdependence too. There's somebody that knew my credit card number, and on and on and on, that we don't realize these things, but we are very closely interconnected to all kinds of people. So the idea is if we can start examining ourselves as an interdependent individual, this helps us see our place in the world. And this leads us to a more realistic view of our place in the world. He finishes this section by saying that this actually causes our lives to be more satisfying and more meaningful. The next part of this chapter is examining the unexamined. He begins by saying that if we analyze our own experiences, we can come to the same conclusions that scientists have. And it's very simple that our body comes from two people and that there are many causes and circumstances that led to those two people being alive. They had to meet each other. They had to have a sex act unless you were created artificially, in vitro fertilization, I believe is the technical term. And then your mother needed many, many things during the 9 months to be able to carry you for 9 months and give birth to you. Besides food, she needed shelter, probably some health care, maybe some help giving birth. Nowadays, at least in the West, you usually give birth in a hospital. Oh, I take this back, and I'm talking way out of my field of knowledge, but I know now they have midwives and on, but I'm not going to go there. So anyway, after that, you needed many things to thrive. If you come to analyze this, you slowly begin to realize that you are not that separate from the rest of the world, from your parents, from your siblings, from your friends, and so forth, that we're actually very dependent on the environment around us, the people around us, so many things that we have really little control over, especially when we're young. And so this idea of being independent just contradicts what's actually happening to us or happened to us. And if we think that we are independent, it leads to being selfish. This, of course, is contrary to the case that by being selfish, this leads to harming ourselves and harming others. We lose the power to influence others and the world when we shut ourselves off and become selfish. On the other hand, if we exist as a person who is dependent on others, we realize we can't be separated from others and they become valuable. We can learn to appreciate them. The next section is from arrogance to love, which is leading us in this direction. He starts out by saying if we feel independent, if we feel we're a separate individual, this leads to pride and arrogance. And this causes relating to others in a very harmful way, using others for selfish reasons. And first of all, there is the term using others. And that's exactly what happens, that we're not concerned about them. We are concerned about what they can do for us. On the other hand, if we can look at them as being interdependent with us, and you might say pay more attention to them, to our individuality and their individuality, and our uniqueness and their uniqueness. And we can cut through the pride and the arrogance. And what happens with pride and arrogance is we start competing with other people. We start telling them of how good we are and all the good things that we have accomplished and all the nice things that we have done, the wonderful, fantastic trips we have taken, the meals that we have eaten at fantastic restaurants, and how much we like our job and yada, yada, yada. Or maybe how much we hate our jobs, which is another form of arrogance. But if we start realizing this connection we have with other people, then responsibility grows from that. And it's important to nurture this understanding of this interdependence that we have with other people. So here is a quote: "We will be able to move beyond knowing that we are dependent upon other people and the natural world to feeling an active sense of love and concern for others." And love is this deep appreciation for what we are receiving from others and wanting to, you might say, pay back the people, to want them to be happy too, rather than just to use them for personal pleasure. So then that leads to the next chapter, which is real self-reliance. And here he talks about change being always possible. And what comes to mind with this statement is one of the main teachings of the Buddha is on impermanence, that nothing lasts. So obviously, if nothing lasts, then change is always possible. In fact, things are always changing, and we always have the opportunity to change too. And in fact, what we usually do is fight change, is I don't want to change. I want stability. But change comes from within. And when we start changing our inner conditions, then our outer conditions start to change. It's really that simple. When we start changing what's going on inside of us, our view of what's going on outside changes. One of my favorite stories is about a friend of mine that lives out in the country like I do, and he has a business in a little town not far from where he lives. And well, he has a car and a motorcycle, and he also has a bicycle because he likes being out in the country. And in the summertime, sometimes he will ride his bicycle to work and back because he likes riding in the country on these lonely country roads and looking at the wildlife and the farms and the fields and the woods and so forth. And he told me this story that one day he was riding home from work and he saw a bag of trash in the road in front of him, and he got mad at the bag of trash, and people especially that throw bags of trash out of their car when they're driving down the country. And when he came up close to it, he realized that it was a bag of fresh groceries. And then he was no longer mad. Now he was happy because it was his bag of fresh groceries. And when he stopped and picked it up and got back on his bicycle, he realized pretty quickly that it was too big and bulky for him to ride the bicycle and hold on to the bag of groceries. So now he was no longer happy. Now he was a little worried because if he left it, somebody might find it and take his bag of groceries. So he decided to hide it in the brush on the side of the road. And then he got on his bicycle, worried, and rode home quickly, gets in his car, again is concerned about will the bag be there when I get back? His bag of groceries, of course. And when he drives back and gets out and goes in the brush, now he's happy because he finds it and he drives home happy. Well, the bag hasn't done anything. It's his state of mind. And of course, he said it was the bag that was causing him all these different emotions. So if we realize that we are projecting on the world what's going on inside of us in our own emotions, we can start working on ourselves and our state of mind, and to have more stability and less reactivity, to be able to realize that, well, maybe this isn't that big a deal after all. Maybe I am turning this into a drama rather than, well, it's just a bag of groceries, or maybe it's a bag of trash. Maybe when I see it's groceries, somebody is going to want to come back and look for it, and I should just put it on the shoulder on the side of the road so they can find it. The ironic thing about this whole story is that decades later, he was riding his motorcycle home from work and he hit a deer, and his saddlebags on the motorcycle fell off. And the motorcycle was taken home, and when he got home, he realized the saddlebags were missing. And he went back for them, and they were gone. I don't know if that's karma or what, but anyway, the point is that we can have healthy self-reliance. We can learn to change on the inside and develop a greater understanding of how our minds and our emotions work and how they affect us. And if we can understand interdependence more and be more mindful of it, we can see we have many opportunities to change our lives and change our viewpoint. He uses the term wisely. In other words, using wisdom to take into consideration other people and external circumstances. We can see that people are suffering and that this can cause them to behave in ways that are both harmful for themselves and can cause you harm. But it's much easier for us to change our attitude towards difficult people than it is for us to change difficult people. And of course, our reaction is that, well, they need to be taught a lesson. I need to teach them how to behave better, that this is not a proper behavior. But if we can realize that we have control of our own emotions and our own mind, and that these conditions, these difficult people, have come here because of interdependence, that we're contacting them because of various causes and conditions. So if we can bring together the internal conditions to change, to be more patient, to be kinder, to be more understanding, to listen to others a little bit more, we can strengthen our good qualities. We can strengthen our love, our confidence, and our wisdom. Of interdependence, one thing by itself does not change or cause change, excuse me. There are multiple causes. He talks about from the micro level to the macro level, from the emotional level to the physical level, that all of these things are intertwined, interdependent. And it's really very difficult to say one thing, this was what caused it. There may have been many events that happened that you might say opened you up so that this one event did change you. So what were the things that led to the conditions being ripe for one event causing you to go, oh, now I see? Or maybe you've never had that experience, but I think all of us have that aha moment. So in terms of compassion, that it takes a lot of different emotional and mental events and elements to develop compassion and to develop love and patience. So appreciation, forgiveness, wisdom, diligence, generosity, discipline, All of these are causes that help us develop as human beings, lead us to, you might say, a better place on the inside and on the outside too. All of these can be cultivated and grown and nurtured. On the other hand, change might take longer than we expect. And it might be that we take 2 steps forward and then we go 3 steps back. And then we go 2 steps forward and then 1 step back and then 4 steps forward. In other words, it's like the stock market. But the important thing is that we are going in the right direction. The next section is titled Self-Cultivation, Not Self-Absorption. And this is an important point. He says that healthy self-cherishing and self-care is valuable, that no one else can do it for you. It's on our shoulders, you might say. We need to learn how to care for ourselves. And then on that basis, we extend this care to other people. And there's a huge difference between this kind of self-care and self-obsession and self-absorption. Self-obsession cuts us off from the rest of the world and its inhabitants that, quote, I sometimes describe, this is a quote from the book, I sometimes describe egocentrism as a prison in which we have shut ourselves away from everyone and everything else. Our ego makes us prisoner. Only a limited few people or pets matter to us, and only they are allowed entry into our self-made jail. Everyone else is irrelevant, as if the world outside the prison doesn't really exist. Our own egotism and self-absorption act as the wardens that keep us shut off from the rest of the world. So this is a very important point. If you have this wrong type of self-care where it's very self-obsessed, you feel that you are independent and you build up walls between yourself and the rest of the world. You feel safe in there. Nothing changes. There's no threats because you're walled in. And actual prisoners, sometimes when they get released, they will purposely do things to get convicted and get back in prison because they feel safer in prison. And so we imprison ourselves with this obsession on I, me, mine, and so forth. And we're not concerned about other people other than what they can do for us. So the way to cut through this is to contemplate other people, realize that they're just like you. They want happiness. They want to be free of suffering. And again, some of these same contemplations that are talked about earlier in this chapter that investigate to see how your situation is dependent on others for your comfort, your mental well-being. We just had Christmas yesterday, and I think most of you have spent at least a little bit of yesterday, Christmas, being with friends or family, talking on the phone, and maybe thinking about family, even if they weren't present. And realize that you can try to have a positive impact on others, whether they are close to you or on the other side of the world. I was with a family that I was not related to yesterday at Christmas, and one woman that was there was talking about wanting a new puppy. And she went to see this one puppy or place where they had puppies for sale. And she thought they were just so cute and she wanted to take one home, but she didn't because she suspected it was a puppy mill. So she did not want to do anything that would encourage puppy mills. So even that little decision had an impact. And we can think about the decisions that we make and how they impact the world, and we can make decisions that are wiser. Now, I'm going to add this. This is not in the book. I think this is a misunderstanding about compassion. People that have a poor self-image. It's interesting. Karmapa talks about having this puffed up, arrogant self-image, but some people have kind of a reverse arrogance, that they think they're really best at being the worst, that they excel in being bad, and they have a very poor self-image of themselves, and they misunderstand the idea of compassion in Buddhism to be that I will have a lot of compassion for people that are like abused women or abused dogs and so forth. And this will somehow or another make me a better person. But no matter how much you do, that it never fills up that black hole that is constantly telling you that you're a bad person, that you've done bad things, and on and on and on. And of course, the remedy for this is to contemplate your Buddha nature. And also, if it's at all possible, to realize that this is all in your mind, that it is not the way you really are, that you are over focusing on perhaps some things that you have done, and that this idea has come through interdependent causes and conditions. Now to go on to the next section, which is humility and confidence. And I think that leads right into this thinking that you excel in being a bad person. And there's a difference between that and humility. Humility and confidence work together. They have a very good, positive place in developing a healthier, happier, interdependent individual. When we feel superior, we try to conceal our weaknesses. By doing that, it makes them harder to work with. Humility is different from, he uses the term self-abasement. Self-abasement is demeaning oneself, abusing yourself, he even says it. It's good to listen to your inner critic and get to know that inner critic. Frequently, we have this inner critic that is constantly telling us how bad we are, and then we try to compensate by putting on this front to the rest of the world about how great we are. We can learn to make peace with that inner critic. I like to say that you make friends with that inner critic, and then you realize that sometimes your friends give you bad advice. You don't have to turn that inner critic into an enemy. Just realize that he's giving you one point of view, and it's a very biased point of view, and you don't have to pay attention to it. And if you do, you can say, well, that's not the way I see things. I used to get hard on myself for forgetting, and I haven't gotten any better at forgetting. If anything, I've gotten more forgetful. But when I remember something, instead of saying, oh, I forgot, and then maybe an expletive, I say, oh, I remember. If I had forgotten, I would never remember. And we want to encourage remembering. And so remembering that you forgot is actually positive. And if we start thinking that way, we realize that there's just a totally different way to look on ourselves, and you might say things that we do. And when we see faults, that's actually a good sign that you're seeing your faults, and in the past you didn't see them. And if you then say, well, that proves that I'm a bad person, that's just more of the same old, same old. You have to realize that seeing your faults is actually good, because then you have something to work with and some way to improve. So there's always room to grow. We're not the best things that we've done. We're not the worst things we've done. We're a mixture. This is this interdependence. Going back to that quote at the beginning of this section, pride puts us in a box, and we don't want to live in a box. And I like this. He says we're always in a state of development. He uses the analogy of science. Now, I took in college, and this was a long time ago, but I remember this to this day. I took a philosophy of science class, and it was taught by a man with a German accent. And the Germans really specialize in philosophy that is difficult to wrap your mind around. But he said that scientific knowledge is held until, quote, further notice, that there is no final scientific knowledge, that it is always held until further notice. So there's always room for discovery. The idea is that there's always room for us to discover new things, to go in new directions, and learn from new experiences and learn from others, that we're not solid. There's always room for improvement, and that there's always room for doing better. As I said, seeing our faults is good, because now we have something that we can work with. And egotistical pride prevents this. It just freezes the situation. There's no room to change. Quote, confidence is a virtuous form of pride. You feel able to do good things, end quote. So feeling that you can do good things. And he also has this quote, humility can help us recognize our responsibilities to others. With confidence, we feel able to act to fulfill them. I just couldn't find a better way to say those. So I rely on the actual words. The next section is being the best ever. Wanting to stand out causes discontent in yourself, causes pressure and stress. wanting to have the best vacation, the best friends, the best job, the best car, or on the other hand, the worst, wanting to be the worst of whatever it is. And I know this seems bizarre, but I have been in that place myself, and I know other people that have been in that place. And it's a very bizarre place, but it's funny how comfortable it can feel. Anyway, this place of wanting to have the best or being the worst is a place of dissatisfaction. It's what's called the poverty mentality, that you never have enough. It's consumerism. Advertisements are based on this very dissatisfaction. Buy this product, somehow or another, things are going to be better. Karmapa talks about the latest, I think, iPhones or just phones that you don't even know how to work all the features of your present phone, but they've come up with a new model and you've got to get that. We see what we don't have and we miss what we do have. Contentment is being able to enjoy what we have and to make full use of it. He uses the term savor. I like that. With mindfulness, life tastes better. We can savor life. If we can reduce our desire for material things, life becomes more stable. Greed makes life unstable because it's limitless. You get something, and then after a little while, you might say the thrill is gone, and then you want a new model of it. If you're not happy before you get what you want, you're not going to be happy for long after you get what you want. Whereas we can consciously cultivate a sense of satisfaction. He uses the word wonder for what you already have. If you look around, there's really a lot of wonder in the world. It might sound like the sort of thing that a 6-year-old would have, but just for example, it was an overcast day. It was above freezing. It sometimes was mist, sometimes not, sometimes a very light drizzle, and there was wind. And I went out to the mailbox to check my mail, and there on the side of the house was a leaf that between the moisture and the wind had stuck on the house on this white board. And I almost took a picture of it because it looked like a work of art, how you would take a leaf and then press it down and then hang it on the wall. I didn't take a picture, but I had a lot of enjoyment, just wonder looking at that and its beauty. So we can be content and still want to progress in life, that it's not contradictory. Contentment doesn't mean living with what you have, and then when things wear out, you just keep them and keep them and keep them. We can want to have a better life. We can want to have a better car and so forth, but it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy what we do have and appreciate it. Life is too precious to squander in desires and unfulfilled wants and needs and so forth. What really makes life valuable is having this opportunity to develop positive qualities and then working on developing these positive qualities, so that wanting to improve ourselves and wanting to be more benefit to ourselves and other people, that this is what really gives meaning to our lives. The next section of this chapter is adjusting the course. So here, I'm going to start out with saying, be mindful. Chogyam Trungpa would say, if you listen, you might hear something. If you look, you might see something. So observe, be mindful of what's happening in your life on the inside and the outside. You can see interdependence at work, and this can help you adjust your daily interactions with people and your attitude towards life. We can appreciate what others do to benefit us, and gratitude can arise. He feels that the more we observe interdependence, the more our understanding deepens and it becomes a way of life. So that was a short section. And then the last one, I think this is the last one. Yes, this is the last part of this chapter. So I'm going to get through the whole chapter. It's the refuge of love. And he talks a lot about himself in this section. He had a very pleasant childhood. And then I believe it was the age of 7, he was discovered as the rebirth of the 16th Karmapa, and then everything changed for him. He was taken from his family to a monastery, and now he was under the care of monks in a strange place, separate from his family. And he went through intense studies. He was saying that this, in a way, is parallel to us too, and that is that we are born into circumstances that are not of our choosing. Then we are subject to all kinds of things that we have no control over. Some of them are very good, and some of them might not be so good. But we need to find a way of making chaos, pain, and so forth an aid to developing positive qualities. He also says pleasure too. So it's not just chaos and pain, but it's also the pleasure. All of this comes into our experience, and we need to use these to develop positive qualities rather than to become self-absorbed and egotistical. And this refers to inner conditions as well as outer conditions. He says that we may not be able to accomplish as much as we would like, but we can do what we are able to and not get down for not being able to do more. That we can try to hold love and affection in our hearts. Love and affection for ourselves and love and affection for other people. And when it comes right down to it, if we don't know how to love ourselves and have affection for ourselves, we really can't have love and affection for other people. I remember a quote by Tralag Rinpoche where he talks about you fall into the situation where you are like a sponge trying to soak up the drops of love that other people leave behind. And so we need to have love and affection for ourselves. We have to realize how important it is to have this, what he talked about, the self-confidence in ourselves. He finishes up this chapter with this quote: once we fully embrace our connections to others We can intentionally breathe life into them. We can fill our lives with meaning and love.